only thing we have to
Beer.
is
Beer.
itself.
Beer. So many choices.
Only no function beer well without.
Woohoo! Beer! Hello and welcome to another episode of Beer Busters. We'll bring you the news and reviews of your favorite brews. I'm Dan Baker, joined once again by my co-host and brewologist,
Steph Hefner.
and of course the demented and fermented,
Wayne Baker.
perhaps I should say it is Cider Busters today. Part of my greater plan to morph into Booze Busters. That is the goal, at least in my mind. We haven't really discussed this. But
At least Booze Busters is still an alliteration.
exactly, and that's why my brain went to that.
You know, that plan is so incredibly insidious that I had completely forgotten it was even a thing. And yet you've still been toiling away at it behind the scenes this whole time.
Every time I get a cocktail instead of a beer, I think of Booze Busters, which I hate to admit kind of happens regularly these days.
Yeah, well, you know.
I don't know. Whiskey
Nothing
does
wrong with expanding our beverage horizons.
Exactly. Plus, whiskey gets you there quicker. But beer and cider, it's a nice steady ride. That's why it's good to fall back on. Well, that being said, we do have joining us a member of a cidery today. And here's a moment of truth. Am I going to say it right? Because I'm trying to remind myself right now. I went through 3 different pronunciations before we started recording. But we have from Ploughman.
That's it.
Woo!
I am Ben Wang from Ploughman Cider. That's owner and founder of Ploughman Cider, and very happy to be with you all today. And kudos in the pronunciation. We hear plenty of variations from time to time. So.
I can imagine. Well, thank you for joining us, Ben. It's a pleasure, and I'm excited to see what cider knowledge you can impart to us. For those wondering, the other pronunciations were Ploughman, and then I went off the rails a little bit with Ploughman, which apparently is a thing that, like, other people... My brain just went to, like, what's the dumbest way I can pronounce it, but I'm sure other people genuinely think it is, and no offense to them, because the English language is strange.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Very strange. Yeah, we get the full spectrum.
I bet. Well, before we dive much deeper, or any deeper really, remember there's a little bit of housekeeping. You listening to this right now, you can, the good thing about podcasts on phones is they will play in the background if you leave your podcast app and go to different apps, maybe social media apps where you might want to follow along with the fun, because on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Threads, you can follow along. We're at Beer Busters. On Facebook, we are Beer Busters Podcast. There's beerbusterspodcast.com, where you can also add /shop. There is YouTube, where we are Beer Busters Podcast. And, of course, there's Patreon, where we are Beer Busters. And as little as $1 a month will get you access to the behind-the-scenes goodies, the archive of punishment videos, and some other goodies. You know, we're still kind of toiling away a little bit on that as well.
We do have another in-the-bank recording as of now that has not been released on Patreon yet from our last episode. Our new sort of not quite last call, we're sort of calling happy hour because it's usually just the 3 of us and it's a little more loosey-goosey. Not that last call was always loosey-goosey.
Yeah.
But maybe a little briefer, a little less edited, maybe a little more just sort of like random conversation. But yes, we are still dripping out content on Patreon. Maybe not as often as we should or would like to, but there are more things coming.
I don't know why, but that phrase made me very uncomfortable.
Maybe it wasn't the best choice of words.
Dripping out content?
Dripping out content.
Yeah, I maybe could have thought of a better adjective or a verb there, but
it's out in the ether now.
Yeah.
I want to go around the horn and see what we are drinking. I will start now. Unfortunately, Ben, I was not able to get any Ploughman cider, but I did have in my fridge a cider. I got a 4-pack on my birthday. My girlfriend and I went to Hale and True here in Philly, and I have Dream Flower, which was one of the coolest... The way I phrased it was it's one of the coolest flavor experiences or flavor journeys I've ever been on. Because this thing, it changes with every sip, and I love it so much. So any excuse to crack this open, I'm very happy to abide. Steph, what are you drinking? What do you got?
I am drinking Stark from Ploughman. It is their 6-year anniversary cider. And it's a nice dry cider, which looking at your portfolio, it seems most of them are on the dry side, which is my preference when it comes to ciders. But man, this is really freaking drinkable too. I'm trying to find an ABV on this. What is do you know offhand, Ben? I'm putting you on the spot. Usually ciders are 6.9, but
yeah, this is 8%, I believe, maybe 8.5. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things we make every year, and also kudos to Hale and True, good friends of ours, and incredible cider makers and hospitality folks, and
Okay.
do a lot to help our industry as well. So always good to support them. Appreciated that as well.
So have you guys brewed an anniversary brewed made? Is brewed an okay verb to use? Brewed
It really is made.
made.
There's it's and honestly, it's not a big deal either way. But brewing to me kind of implies some kind of heating element,
Yeah.
and there's not going to be any heating in the making of the cider, generally speaking. But yeah, Stark was the first thing we ever made. So that was
Oh wow.
the 2nd of December in 2016. And so we try to come up with a new blend of Stark for each passing year, and kind of a good way to mark time. And there's generally it's a blend that's based upon the Asopa Spitzenberg apple, which is an American heirloom that we're all very fond of. And so that's the one constant is usually looking at some Spitzenberg, but generally a cider that has a little bit of acidity, dry, and still fruity. That's kind of what we're going for. And we kind of we like the variability that making a new blend for each year kind of creates. We like having a little different, a little change in each version of it.
Now, can you a cider like this? Is this something I could put in the cellar and save, and like years from now do like theoretically, if I had bottles of previous years, could do like a vertical similar to what you could do to like with like a barrel aged beer? Is that okay with cider as well?
Yeah, generally speaking, we kind of package ciders in glass bottles that we feel can be cellared in that way, and then experienced over time and seeing how it changes and stuff. Yeah, we love nerding out on that the same way as you would a vertical in a beer situation, and we've done some fun verticals, like we'll sell them at our anniversary party and stuff like that. And yeah, it can be a fun exploration for sure.
Now, I apologize ahead of time because we may ask some more dumbed down questions, I think, than we usually do in beer centered episodes. I was looking back on our website today to see how many cideries we've actually had on the show. And the first one that came up was actually 100 episodes ago. This is episode 255. And episode 155, we had Joe from Current Cider, RAP, on the show. And we learned a lot from him. We've recorded at Windridge Farm. Now, that was a cider and a beer podcast. And I think and Freycon. We had the guy from Freycon Farm was on when we did the fest up at the Liederkranz. So we've had a couple cideries featured on the show, but I have been drinking way more cider recently. Sometimes I actually prefer it over beer. I mean, maybe my palate is changing or I'm just looking for something different. So I'm excited to learn from you and see where cider and beers kind of overlap and maybe not so much. But I did want to apologize at the top in case we come out with some simple questions to begin with. And Wayne, I realized I never let you answer what you're drinking.
Oh, well, that's okay. I was going to just let it slide because my answer is orange flavored seltzers.
Okay.
Nothing wrong with that.
I know when we record on a Monday, you're usually more of a
I try to
seltzer drinker.
I try for many reasons to stick to not weeknight drinking. So
I guess something that's super unique about Ploughman is it sort of started with the fruit because your family farm, Three Springs Fruit Farm, which has been around for over 100 years. I mean,
long time.
I read that you're a 7th generation farmer.
That's correct.
Maybe start there, talk about the family farm and maybe then how that led to the cidery.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely the origin of things for us. I've kind of grew up in the orchard industry and the fruit business, and spent a lot of time working on the farm when I was growing up. Eventually did decide to go to school for agriculture and came back and started doing farmers markets right out of college, including there at Head House in Old City, Philadelphia. Was one of the first farmers markets we attended, and we've been there pretty much every week since, going on, I think, 15 years now. So, that's really where it started. The Ploughman cider brand really was born out of farmers markets. Like, we were going to Head House very early on. I remember a specific farmers market that my dad and I attended that we had a very successful day, and we're feeling pretty well. Let's duck into the pub back here and have a pint before we head back and celebrate. And I was still in like post-college craft beer discovery mode. I'd only ever had woodchuck as a cider at that point. But I was really good at going into a place and ordering something from a tap handle that I didn't recognize. And I ordered a strongbow, not even knowing it was cider. I'm just like, well, strongbow, I've never had whatever that is. Let's have one. And that was really a moment of discovery because it was a cider that had a little bit more complexity, a little bit more dry character than maybe what you would get in a woodchuck. And it really kind of, as somebody who was in his early 20s, right out of college at the time, kind of the marriage of apples and alcohol had a certain appeal to me. But it was not one that was, that I ever would have gotten to just knowing woodchuck for whatever that's worth. So that's kind of where it started. I started doing some home cider making batches that fall, and that would have been, 2007. And yeah, eventually we started kind of getting a network of chefs that would shop the farmers market. By the time I figured out this could be like a new enterprise, we kind of had a little bit of, a network established that I thought would be helpful in kind of marketing this product if we could make something that we were proud of. And from there, found somebody who could make the cider that we could hire as our cider maker. That's Edwin. He's been with us the whole time as a partner in the company. And so it started out in my mind as a way for us to have a new way to market the fruit that we were already growing. But the real important change that occurred was watching the Botany of Desire documentary, in which Steve Wood from Farnham Hill, who's a real kind of like, he was a very early adopter and has really moved this kind of orchard-based cider type of movement forward in the United States, mentioned that cider wasn't a value-added product. And I remember at the time I had just finished our business plan that said that it was. And when he explained that, no, if you're going to make the best cider, you need to be using cider-specific apples. This is his opinion that he's, putting forward in this documentary. And if you're using cider-specific apples, there's no secondary use for them. You can't make them into pies. You can't sell them at farmers markets or anything like that. So that really was a real pivotal moment. So that's kind of how, it started as an idea that would be a way to market the fruit that the farm was already growing, and quickly turned into a way that our farm was going to change to make this very unique product. So that's as short a version as I can get you from the origins of the cider company through the farmers markets, and through all the quick education I had to start to put this stuff together.
So what is the theory behind cider apples can only be used for cider? Like, what makes them not good for pies? What makes them not good for anything else?
Sure. Well, I'll start out by saying that, you can make good cider from a wide range of apples. Mm-hmm. But to make the kinds of cider that we get most excited about, that we wanted to build our brand around, we're talking about cider apples that have bittersweet and bitter sharp characteristics. And the bitterness from those apples comes in the way of tannins. So the same tannins that you might get in like a big red California cab or a black tea that kind of coats your tongue and makes, feels like there's a little bit of like a cat's tongue or fuzziness on your teeth or things like that. There are apples that exist that provide those same tannins in the flesh of the fruit. And, it's kind of our belief that really can take the experience of drinking a cider to the next level, is when you're able to find a cider that has those bittersweet and bitter sharp fruits. And so that was like where we changed our philosophy from, let's take all these apples we're growing and turn them into alcohol, to, okay, we're going to do a little of that, but it's most important that we grow new varieties that can give that extra dimension that at the time, certainly very few ciders in the United States were really made with those kinds of apples. And actually Steve Wood from Farnham Hill was really a pioneer in that way. And a lot of other cideries that have been around, 20, 25 year kind of window. But yeah, that was a really important step in our growth.
Does that provide cause any challenges like changing to growing those varieties of apples, or can you just kind of hot swap them in and just keep going?
Oh, you guys are asking great questions. This is yeah. So there's I'm going to struggle to answer that question quickly, but I'll try to be as succinct as I can. At the time we decided to grow these apples, these specific varieties, which very few people had heard of, and even fewer had actually grown in the Mid-Atlantic United States. We didn't have very much research at all for me to plan, what varieties to grow, how many of what varieties to grow, how they would pollinate each other, what kind of growth habit they have, if they're, all the characteristics that are important to us on the orchard side. There's very little information available for how these varieties were going to perform in the Mid-Atlantic area. The best I could do is I did find some research from Washington State that would at least allow me to understand what the bloom times would be. And even if they aren't the same dates, they should be compatible. If these are blooming the same time in Washington, they should be approximately blooming the same time in Pennsylvania. So we grew a lot of these trees just on wild speculation of, what characteristics we were told they have, or what characteristics they might bring to a cider aromatically. And it was literally just kind of throwing, at the wall and seeing what sticks. Now, a couple years down the road, having fruited those varieties, having seen more cider fruit being grown in different parts of the United States, a lot of those varieties typically were ones that were borrowed from England and France and Spain and essentially cider making Europe. And we're learning that a lot of those varieties don't necessarily grow comfortably in our area. So we found a couple that I think will stick around and will be, regularly part of blends from Mid-Atlantic orchards. But increasingly, I think the whole industry is turning more towards old, traditional American cider varieties, some of which were thought to be extinct even 20 years ago, and featuring those varieties a little bit more in our cider making, and finding kind of different roles for those fruit and trying to find those same characteristics that we love in those French, British, Spanish style ciders, but finding those characteristics in American varieties that have a little bit more compatibility with our climate, if that makes any sense.
Interesting. I'm curious, you mentioned that there wasn't a whole lot of literature out there to research when you started swapping to these cider specific apple varieties. Since you've now done that and sort of worked with them for a while, have you been able to contribute to the knowledge? Like, are you now able to say, well, now I know that these varieties, will react this way to this climate? Like, are you able to now give this knowledge to other cider makers now that you have some experience with these varieties?
Yeah, for sure. And, there's been some university, peer-reviewed research about these types of topics. A little bit at Penn State, I think most notably with Dr. Greg Peck up at Cornell in New York, who his primary research concentration is apples for the making of hard cider. There's definitely like a very kind of small insular community of cider makers who like to use these varieties, who have their own orchard, who, we're very, it's a tight-knit community. So, I'm able to contribute my experiences, and I might, I have trusted people that I can call up and be like, hey, what does this variety look like for you on this root stock, or how does this perform in Western Pennsylvania? And in addition to that, I've also started a test block that has over 175 new varieties that I'm like looking at specifically in our climate, because again, even the best information I might get out of a Cornell University or something is not going to be the unique microclimate that we have in South Central Pennsylvania. There's good research at Virginia Tech. There's good research at Cornell. But I mean, the best I can do, unless I'm going to do the research myself, is just approximate what half and half looks like. So I'm very keen on like getting that experience and actually seeing how some of these varieties that are new to us are going to perform in our unique part of the world.
Ben, do you know what perhaps fraction of cideries have their own orchards? I mean, it's pretty unusual. Usually a cidery, at least I was under the assumption, would purchase the apple juice from an orchard and then create cider from that. Are there several cideries like you that also have their own orchards?
It's a significant number, but it is still a vast minority in the industry, not only here in Pennsylvania, the Mid-Atlantic, but also on a national scale. I just remember my first cider con, which was in 2016 in Portland, Oregon. When the whole industry got together, there was like a straw poll, just one of those like little clicker surveys, and I believe the number of respondents as a percentage that had their own orchard and were making their own label of cider was about 10%. And that's 10% of the number of producers. And certainly if you were to take that same like poll and apply it to volume produced, it would be a rounding error of a rounding error. I mean, it's like the larger cider market does not operate in the same way we do. And, that's a good thing and a bad thing. And I think that, our goal as Ploughman is to kind of, really find the few folks out there that kind of gravitate towards what we're trying to do as an alternative to some of the larger brands.
What are some of the advantages of being in your position where you have your own apples? Well, and even with you, I mean, you've have this farm for so long and are so knowledgeable. Like I've never talked to someone that is so knowledgeable about apples and so passionate about this before, but there has to be a lot of advantages to pretty much controlling your product from seed to glass.
For sure. That is a real advantage is not only, having a good, as reliable as an agricultural product can be. We're still going to have ups and downs in productions and weather and all kinds of things agriculturally that we have to contend with in order to keep that, supply of apples constant. But, it really does. And I should also mention there's a latency to this too, right? Like if I maybe decide that like our future for cider making is going to be based upon the Harrison apple, for example, that's, I might decide today in 2023 that that's a great plan. I can't really capitalize on that plan until at least 10 years down the road.
Wow.
Because I need to, I need to be ordering the trees, planting the trees, training the trees, and starting to harvest, maybe significant crops of fruit, 3 and 4 years after we plant them, which as we sit here today, I would probably want to do an arrangement with our nursery to get exactly the trees we want on the exact rootstock, which means we wouldn't be planting them until 2025 anyhow. So there is a latency to this, but yes, the overall idea is sound that, if we can figure out what those varieties are and the characteristics that we desire in our blending, so far as our ability to control the weather and have a good crop of apples, we should have a good control of that product. And it does make our job a lot easier when we know exactly what we're getting. We don't have to order apples or juice from somebody and then, get them in front of us and come to find out that it's less than what we desire. It's really nice to have that control of the raw ingredients in that way, for sure.
I would imagine that level of foresight that you need to have might introduce, if not more stress, probably less desire to risk anything. I mean, God forbid, what happens if you plant something and start the process and you find 4 or 5 years down the road that the consumer's tastes have changed and that's not going to be what you want. I mean, I'm sure you could probably, depending on the apples, use them for different things. But like, what happens in that case?
Yeah, and actually, I'm really glad that you phrased that question the way you did, because it made me very conscious of the fact of not fully answering the last question you asked me, which I apologize.
No, that's fine.
But you had also introduced the concept of what makes these cider apples kind of such a unitasker, right? And it is the bitterness of those tannins that really makes them undesirable for anything other than producing alcohol. Like, they're bitter enough that, I mean, I'm an apple nerd. I really enjoy eating weird cider apples, but to like somebody who doesn't enjoy the complexity and the eccentric nature of these fruit, like, you can bite into one of these cider apples and be like, oh, this tastes like chalky wet cardboard. But they make extraordinary cider. And so, yeah, there is a huge risk involved, especially like the way we started this whole enterprise growing the cider apples, because we knew nothing of what these apples what the trees would grow like, or what the resulting fruit would be in terms of quality and how they would perform. But yeah, there's certainly because, like, just for example, my father, who is one of the farm owners with me and myself and my uncle, are the owners of Three Springs Fruit Farm. Like, there's only about 3 or 4 fields or blocks of fruit that my dad has ever planted twice. He's been working for our family farm since he graduated college in 1980. But that's, you're devoting at least 20, usually closer to 30, 35 years of that plot of land to the apples or, other fruit trees that you're planting there. So, there's 2 things that go into that. You have to kind of be confident and optimistic that your experience and your education and your training and how to grow apples is going to make that a profitable venture, just looking at the economics on the farm side of things, because, each block is going to require tens of thousands of dollars of investment. And, your best projections would have you, getting return on that investment in like year 5 or 6. And we're talking about, growing things outdoors in Mother Nature. So that already, you assume that level of risk to begin with. So I guess the best way for me to answer that question is yes, but it just comes with the territory. We are so used to, risking large chunks of land on new, somewhat untested varieties of apples that, this is really just a different version of the same thing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. Also, what's involved in training a tree?
Well, that's another great question.
I
So
don't know about that.
training a tree is, I guess I'll take you back a little bit. Every apple tree that is grown in a commercial setting, for the most part, has to be almost 100% of them, is going to be 2 different trees grafted together. So the way you get a Macintosh apple tree is you have to take a cutting from an existing Macintosh apple tree and then graft it to another tree. If you were to take, let's say you have 12 seeds inside of Macintosh apple, if you grow all 12 of those seeds, you'll get 12 completely unique progeny that are genetically dissimilar from each other. So when you're grafting these trees, you're choosing what's called a root stock, which is the part of the tree that's kind of like under the ground, based on how tall, how it branches, how wide it'll grow, how big the trunk gets, how soon it comes into bearing. So training a tree, first thing you got to do is select the root stock that will make a tree of the size that you envision when you lay out the whole block of orchard trees. And then the other training steps are going to depend on, what kind of grower this apple variety is. It's always going to include pruning. Apple trees are generally pruned every year in the winter time. And so that's going to do a good job of getting that training established so that you have essentially a framework, we'll say, is a good way to thinking about it, as to how to grow the fruit on this framework of a tree. And then other training will depend on, if this is a tree that's just going to be supported by a single stake, or if you're going to grow a big trellis with wires and posts to help train the tree that way. And at that point, you might be bending limbs, you might be tying them to either the post or to the trellis. And all of this work is in the interest of making that tree grow more fruit and less limbs and leaves, because they grow, either vegetatively or propagatively. And so the training is trying to, just through natural horticultural means, manipulating that tree to be a productive grower of fruit, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm really fascinated of the like chimera base versus, thing. So if you just randomly grew apple seeds, the qualities of those subsequent fruits would be all very distinct and like basically like determined by the tiniest little like genetic variations. So you have to take one that's already existing, grafted onto something, so the qualities that the fruits can. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Okay. So apples have more chromosomes, more sets of DNA than do human beings, and they're more heterozygous, meaning that not only are there more combinations of genes, but you're less likely to look like your parents if you're an apple tree than you would be a human being. That being said, you'll still be able to see a lot of the characteristics. Like John of Gold's a good example. So John of Gold, as the name suggests, is half of its parentage is Jonathan, half of his parentage is Golden Delicious. And when you bite into a John of Gold, if you grow a John of Gold, you can be like, well, yeah, I mean, that checks out. It kind of grows like a Golden Delicious and has a little bit of tartness like a Jonathan, and there you go. But that isn't always the case. They can vary very wildly when you grow things from seeds. And, honestly, and this is, if folks are familiar with Johnny Appleseed, who was an actual human being, he wasn't like Paul Bunyan, he was an actual guy. When he was going around planting all those seeds, because they're so variable when you propagate an apple tree by seed, that, those seeds were more likely to be making alcoholic cider than they would be to, making a fruit that a frontiers person would snack on. And it's for those reasons. Yeah.
Right. Well, so I imagine if you took statistically speaking, if you just took thousands of apple varieties, would a small percentage of them would actually be tasty to eat in and of themselves. So it's more likely that you would get a bitter variety just because they're more likely to show up.
That's correct. And, just a quick add-on to that concept, because we were talking a little bit about how, the first way that the orchard-based cider companies in the United States started growing these varieties, they were basing it, they're bringing varieties over from England and Europe broadly to grow them in the United States. Not only is our industry more interested in American varieties that have been preserved for hundreds of years, we also believe there's a lot of potential in seedling apples, especially ones that have been growing without any kind of human intervention, that might be growing on the side of the road or back in the woods or something, and they've been thriving without anybody there to manipulate and train them and protect them from diseases and pests. And we're really interested right now in the United States. A lot of folks are trying to find sources of wild apple genetics and seeing if they can be grown commercially for their characteristics in cider and for the ease of how they're grown, if that makes sense. So that's a real emerging trend right now in a lot of American orchard-based cideries is going out and sometimes even just scavenging for that wild fruit and making that a big part of their blends.
That's pretty cool. It's really cool to think that there might be these old apple varieties hiding in plain sight out there, and you're just going out and finding them. That's really, and they're hardy because nobody's been taking care of them. Mm-hmm. So
right.
So, I just want to mention, I just opened Disselfunk.
Yeah.
This is freaking phenomenal. Not what I was expecting at all. It's a wild fermented cider with peaches, and
Yeah.
like it. I don't even have words. It just like freaking blows my mind. So I had to just jump there before I finish it because I'm drinking it really fast. It's just like, and the label is really freaking cool too. I mean,
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, that is a really, really fun product, and like it's one of those beverages, like so many of my favorite beverages, that isn't necessarily for everyone, but the people that really like it really, really like it, and that's something that actually a lot of my friends who are also cider makers, that tends to be one that they gravitate to as well. And I'm very glad that you're enjoying it. And yeah, it's we're in prime peach season right now, so we actually just put a reel up on our Instagram of us processing a lot, and I mean thousands of pounds of second peaches from our farm, so we can make more of Distal Funk and another product we make called Birdwatcher, which is a cider that we make with our own apples and our own peaches. And so those are.
I also picked that.
There we go.
There it is.
Maybe I'll open that one. So, but are peaches like when I know that you use many other fruits, peaches being one in your ciders, is the variety of peach as important as the variety of apple? Or like you mentioned, you chose seconds. So like any peaches can be added to the cider. It's more critical to choose certain apple varieties.
Yeah. So, apples are really, they're not singularly unique this way, but I'm an apple nerd. And one of the things I love about apples is how incredibly diverse they are flavor wise.
Mm-hmm.
And, the United States, we used to have like regional and use specific apples, so that like, if you were living in Eastern Indiana and then, at the turn of the century, there was a specific apple that you might use to make dried apples, or one specific one that you would use to make apple butter. And like, now today people expect the same 8 to 10 varieties you see in a grocery store to do all the things that apple can do. But all that to say is like the apples are incredibly diverse in flavor, texture, how they'd be used optimally. The peaches have, and that's why when you think about it, apples are one of the few fruits that have large scale name recognition for the varieties. Very few people can name a peach variety. I'm doubling back to your question.
White and yellow aren't varieties of peaches.
Well, they're not. But there is a very large number of peach varieties out there. Now, apples, it's believed that through the course of history, there's been over 10,000 named varieties of apples.
Wow.
The number of named varieties of peaches is significantly less, because primarily when we're planting different varieties of peaches, we're really, and we do have a preference for flavor. Like we're always choosing the varieties that are going to go to that farmer's market and be the best damn peach that you can eat. That's our top priority. But the other thing is you're essentially planting yellow peaches and white peaches in such a way that, as we run out of peaches in this block, the next block is starting to harvest, and there's a constant avalanche of peaches from, generally July 1, even though this was the earliest peach year we've ever had. But generally, we think about peach season from about July 1 until Labor Day. And so there are plenty of peach names out there, but we're mostly selling yellow peaches as yellow peaches, white peaches as white peaches, because there's not a whole lot of name recognition. So the fun thing about the second peaches is the early peaches are clingstone. And so a lot of times, like, they'll have this thing where the pits rather will split open in the middle. And so it makes it a lot of difficult to sort the early peaches. But now that we have the machinery that we can like process them into something that we can, make Ploughman cider out of, now all those second peaches that we're usually grading out and trying to find a home for them, like, they're all going to make some of our best-selling products, and we can, make a lot of it, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I'm also curious. This one says it's 4.5% ABV. You don't often see a sessionable cider, beers being 4.5 and below being considered session ciders. What is it about this one that makes it a lower ABV compared to most of the others that are like 6.9 and 8.5%?
Sure.
Are there more
So
residual sugars left behind, perhaps? I don't know.
not in this case. And almost all of our cider is fully dry, and we, generally speaking, do not make the cider to a given ABV. We kind of like minimal intervention, let the fruit do what it wants to do, and we will figure out a way to package it and sell it appropriately. The reason that
if you make it, they will drink it.
That's right. That's right. You know what? Who am I to impose what I want this apple to become? Like, just let it be its own natural apple self and ferment as just to its own volition, right? In the case of Distal Funk, it's actually the fact that the peaches actually have a lower sugar and thus a lower starting gravity. And because it is a product that is majority peach and rather than majority apple, that is what's going to affect the finishing ABV on Distal Funk specifically. We do back blend with some apples to kind of give it a little bit more fruity character. The full-on wild fermented, and I should also mention that almost everything that we make at this point is using spontaneous or wild fermentation. We're not really pitching many commercial yeasts at all at this point in the shed at Ploughman, and the peaches are they're no different in that way. And in a lot of ways, we think of Distal Funk as like kind of our ode to Spanish Sidra and the natural ciders of Spain. We actually have done some fun events where we long pour it in the more Spanish style and stuff like that, which is really fun. But yeah, that's primarily a product of the starting gravity of the peaches, and again, just letting it be its own wild fermentation and pursue its own little peachy alcohol dreams. That's the idea.
This is one of those moments where I really miss us recording in person, because I really wish you guys could be tasting this with me.
Yeah.
It's just like I've never had a cider like this.
Yeah, and it is also because it's not beer, and it's always like, I mean, obviously we love drinking beer, but like it's so exciting to like talk about a new kind of product like this, and to be able to talk about it while having it is even better. But I also wanted to mention, I think there is still a video somewhere in the bowels of Facebook of us doing the long pour. What do they call it? A pour on or whatever?
Yeah.
From Current.
Yes. Yeah. Stretch pours, porons, all that fun stuff. It's a really fun way to present cider, especially when people are just getting to know the beverage. And it's that kind of atmosphere that kind of thing creates is just wonderful. I love it.
So what other fruits besides peaches do you put in some of your ciders?
Sure. For the most part, we're really just taking inspiration from the things that we grow here on the farm, with a few notable exceptions. So one of those things is a long time ago when I started selling stuff to Reading Terminal Market on the farm side of things, long before Ploughman. I had one of my buyers there, Sarah, if she happens to listen to the podcast, was telling me that aronia berry is going to be the next big superfood. It's full of antioxidants. And that kind of stuck with me. And I remember I ordered 4 bushes for my mom's flower garden because it has a beautiful white flower. And then I could see if this was going to be a potential crop for the farmers markets and stuff. And boy, I like eating aronia berries, but I'm a weirdo because they are very, very astringent. They are bitter and they are acidic, and they are also chock full of tannins. And like, I had kind of like given up on the idea of aronia berry until we started the cider company. I'm like, oh, wait a second. I bet you that would make a great blend in cider. So that's how we came up with Ken Speckle. That is a cider we make with aronia berries or choke berries. So it's like a beautiful rosé color, has like this nice minerality, and it kind of it gives it more of a like cranberry aroma when you blend it with the apples the way we do. So that's certainly part of it. As somebody who kind of came into cider as a big craft beer drinker coming out of college, I also insisted that we have a really good hop cider, because I really love the marriage of hops and cider. And as I've been traveling around to places like Yakima Valley, Washington to study apples, or down into New Zealand to study apples. Everywhere I went, I'm like, well, there's the hop yard. It's right beside the apples. The same thing in England, like there was old, like, big, they had these unique, like, tower spire things when I was traveling in the west of England. I'm like, hey, what are those things? Oh, that used to be a hop drying barn, and it's right in the middle of essentially cider country in the west of England. So that's not something that we're growing on the farm, but something I'm, very passionate about, is having a good hop cider for, getting off the lawnmower or something, just kind of hits the spot. We've done some stuff with cherries as well. Most recently, we've actually been taking our sour cherries and turning them into a vermouth, which has been really fun to work on. But we've done some cider with cherries, but I think we're stuck on this vermouth thing as the way to use the cherries. And, more than that, we're not purists, but we really love pouring cider for people that really not only shows what a great environment we have in Adams County. I wish I would have brought this up sooner. That's really at the heart and the passion behind what we're doing is we're trying to get folks to understand that Adams County, Pennsylvania is such a beautiful and unique place to grow fruit. It's really one of the best places in the world, in my opinion, to grow apples. And we want the ciders to express that. And we also want the ciders that people are drinking to, going back to another thing I'd mentioned, to kind of put that diversity of apple flavors on display. So, our real passion is doing apples only ciders with some really unique varieties, and mixing in some other ingredients from the farm when it makes sense for the farm. In other words, like, not that there's anything wrong with doing a blueberry cider, but we're not going to do one just because we feel like we have to. If we ever had a year where, like, it rained for 2 weeks and we had too many blueberries, well, then we'll make a blueberry cider because we have too many blueberries, for example.
So that's all. I mean, I love hearing about all the fruit that you can put in there, but what about, like, adjuncts? And I only asked that because a cider I had years ago just popped into my brain from the brewery and vineyard at Hershey. It was a cider that had, like, real peanut butter in it, and it was such a unique flavor. And I love almost everything apple flavored, and God knows I love peanut butter. So that was just like a match made in heaven. But do you see yourself, or do you already do anything with adjuncts or different non-fruit or, crop-based flavors?
Yeah, I mean, the adjuncts that we do are either, to benefit the farm. Like, a great story with that is a cucumber cider we make called Woodrow, where, we had, again, an excessive amount of rain. This was 2018, which was the rainiest year in our area I was like a, 120-year streak of the most precipitation or something ridiculous. It was almost, I think it was like 74 inches of rain that year. It was ridiculous. But anyhow, we had a huge crop of cucumbers, and we didn't know what to do with them. And I'd actually just had a cucumber IPA from a brewery here in eastern Pennsylvania, and I brought back a growler and said, hey, Edwin, ever have any thoughts of making a cucumber cider? And that's how that thing came about. Other adjuncts we've done have been, like, honestly, in the interest of doing a fun collaboration for charitable causes. We did a great cider called Muiba, which is a Malaysian-inspired cider. We put that together with my friend Jamie and Angie. Angie is about to reopen a restaurant similar to the one that was open when we started the collaboration. So everyone go visit Kumpar Kitchen. It's going to be right across the street from Hale and True. Late summer this fall, but we did that collaboration with her. We just released a hibiscus cider to raise some money for a charity in Gettysburg that's important to me. That it's a sister cities charity with Leon, Nicaragua. Generally speaking, like, we're not. So I just reeled off a whole bunch of ciders that we use adjuncts for, we use adjuncts in rather, and we're very intentional with how and why we do that, because at the end of the day, we really feel like the thing that's going to set us apart is the apples that we can grow in Adams County. And using the native yeast from our orchards, because then you got a product that no one can replicate. We're talking about, the yeast from our orchard, the specific varieties we grow, and they're going to taste different grown on my farm than they would our neighbor on the other side of the hill. And it's just my personal philosophy that as far as adjuncts in cider are concerned, there's only so many triple berry, dry hopped, lactose sugar ciders, before you run out of combinations of all these things. Whereas if we're, using native yeast and unique varieties that are grown in our specific farm, we have an endless possibility of different flavors to draw from that can't be replicated by anyone else in the marketplace. So not only is that kind of like our true north from a philosophical standpoint, but it's also strategically a way that's going to separate us in the marketplace. So while we're not anti-adjunct, it's always going to be a very small part of what we do. And that's from a marketing and a philosophical standpoint, if that makes any sense.
Oh, for sure. I love that. I mean, I have dabbled in drinking mostly beers that have adjuncts, and the pendulum has swung the other way. And I've dabbled in drinking, just more or less Reinheitsgebot beers. But with cider, I would imagine it's such a distinct flavor already. Like, everybody goes into a cider knowing whether or not they like apples. And I'm sure there's a good chance to sway somebody's opinion by doing cool things or using different varieties or everything. But the adjunct part, I feel like, would be a crutch for a lot of cider makers who are not as conscious of these things as you are. And I'm really glad to hear you say that your adjunct use is very deliberate and calculated and is in favor of being unique. I love that. I absolutely love that. And I really think more beverage makers in general should adopt that philosophy.
Well, yeah, and a couple things about that. One, there's lots of adjunct ciders that I love to drink.
Oh, for sure. So I don't mean to knock them as a whole.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I just want to make sure I establish that up front. And not only that, but it's also a very easy way for a category such as cider that is still a growing but a smaller part of the greater scope of how people enjoy alcoholic beverages in this country. And a lot of times some of these adjunct ciders are a great onboarding mechanism for these folks. And in particular, hop cider the same way. Beth Demon is about to release an incredible book that's kind of cider for beer drinkers. It's going to be released this fall, and I encourage folks to seek it out, because there is a cider out there for everybody. Because of some really bunk laws, especially here in Pennsylvania, but really on a national scale, before the American Cider Association kind of started doing some lobbying efforts to fix some of these antiquated laws around cider in the United States. The way the laws around that beverage were written, it really only allowed one type of cider to be made for a long time with any kind of significant distribution footprint. And that was a cider that was 5.5% alcohol or less, and that was sweet, appley, and fizzy. And, because the laws were essentially so monolithic in that way, it's created misinformation among the general public that cider can only be this one thing. And now that the laws have been a little bit more less linear and a little bit more open in terms of because quite honestly, you're making cider the way we make it. There's not an apple that we grow that would ferment to 5.5% without us adulterating it. The laws were literally requiring us to make a cider less than what we wanted to make. But now, I think people are starting to discover that cider can be made in different ways, and it can have different, and the same way that, there's occasions for drinking Pilsner and Kolsch, and there's occasions for drinking stouts and porters, and there's such a wide range of beer that you can enjoy any time of the year that you feel like it. Cider has a variability in that category that not a lot of people so far have recognized and embraced. And that's the really cool thing is right now, because we can make cider in a variety of different ways with the loosening of the laws, that people are starting to figure out, oh, well, I actually kind of like cider. I only like it maybe this way or that way. I don't maybe like all of it, but these particular things are resonating with me. And that's a really exciting thing. That's one of the things that keeps me kind of like constantly motivated, is seeing people, learning what kind of cider they like to drink and not thinking about it as such a like monolithic category of beverage drinking.
So I picked up this next bottle because it says it was a blended barrel aged beer cider. Sorry, Floridian slip there. So I'm curious about barrel aged, but this is the Dabonet Roxbury. Roxbury Russet, which is, I guess, a blend of two apples. And I love the little tidbits on the label. And it says that the Roxbury Russet was discovered in Massachusetts in 1635.
Whoa.
Yeah, the Roxbury Russet is one of the oldest varieties to the continent. And that's a cider that that to me can sometimes be a little bit more of a cider nerd cider. It's the kind of stuff that I really like to drink, and that our cider maker Evan loves to drink, and a lot of our wonderful staff at our tap room in Gettysburg. Like, we try to recommend this to a lot of people, but it can be a very aggressive cider if folks are coming from a more traditional 6-pack cider background. So yeah, I mean, like we really enjoy barreling cider. Our goal is to find old neutral barrels and use them over and over and over again. We're not really interested in the barrels for what the previous spirit might impart on the cider. We want it to be a complementary part of the blend, so that, and specifically the Dabonet Roxbury, what we're trying to do is get a lot of tannins from the Dabonet. We're trying to get a lot of acidity from the Roxbury Russet, which is a very acidic variety, acid forward. And we're trying to get a little bit more softer, more roundness, a little bit of that kind of, just a little bit of that like barrel vanilla, such that like these three aggressive concepts, the acidity, the tannins, and the barrel, are aggressively loud in equal proportions. That was our goal in making the Roxbury Russet. But if you're trying it, I think you'll find it wildly different from, just as different as Stark to Distal Funk might have been, that you might find it equally different going from the Distal Funk to the Dabonet Roxbury, because it's a very, very, it's a loud cider, but we kind of like that.
Yeah. No, it is lovely, and you get the vanilla notes, and in it's equally aggressive and delicate at the same time, if that makes sense. But you definitely get that strong aroma, but the flavors, you have to take a few sips, because each time you notice something different. It's lovely.
Yeah, and that's those are the ciders that we love to drink. That, if you pour it into a glass, each time you're grabbing that glass and it warms up a little bit, like, it's like unpacking it. It's the kind of nerdy cider that's going to change over time. Like, each time you go back to it, just like you said, you're going to find something different, something new, something you missed the first time. And I mean, I love a cider you can just like crack and again, you come home from a long day of work, you might not want that Dabonet Roxbury. You might need like a get off the lawnmower cider, and then like something a little bit more esoteric like that later on. But I mean, this is just a great example of what we're talking about. There's a cider out there for everybody. It's just a matter of like figuring out what you like.
It's the kind of cider you don't want to open by yourself, because you definitely want to talk about it.
Yeah. And that's, we love those conversations. That's why we got into this business in the first place. Like, drinking cool stuff and chatting with friends and making it kind of educational at the same time. I love that kind of thing.
I guess we should mention, which you alluded to in our last part of the conversation, that you guys do have a tap room in Gettysburg in Lincoln Square, correct?
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, we've been there for it'll be we started doing pop-ups in 2019, so the pop-up era, it's almost 3 years now that we've been there, and we had our grand opening in October of 19, which as you might suspect, as first-time bar owners that are really farmers by trade, running a bar in the year 2000 was a real learning curve. We learned a lot, but we're still here. We're still doing our thing, and again, we're very fortunate here in Pennsylvania that our Act 39 laws allow us to pour other things that are made in Pennsylvania. So not only do we have, I think, 14 different ciders that you could try of our own make while you're there. We also are very fortunate to work with some of the same breweries that support us and are purchasing our cider for their respective tap rooms. For the beer crowd out there, we've got a great selection of beer that we're able to pour in the tap room as well, and a little food menu, and pretty much open lunch and dinner 6 days a week, every day but Monday. And yeah, if you're heading that way, give us a shout. I'll see if I can free myself up over to visit everybody. And yeah, it's a nice little spot, and it's been really interesting trying to kind of take a community that like grows a lot of apples and processes a lot of apples, but really wasn't familiar with cider. So it's been a really kind of a fun, exciting thing to kind of see our community starting to embrace cider for a community that knows so much about apples. Like the cider was kind of a new thing, but we're starting to get them excited about it. It's been really fun.
Very cool.
When I noticed on your website, you have quite an impressive list of restaurants, bars, breweries, retail shops, farmers markets that sell your product. You guys ship to 40 states? Was the wide distribution always part of the plan, or was it just part of you opening at the end of 2019 and something happening a few months after that? Did that sort of influence that?
Well, yeah. So, on the so we self-distribute from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia and all points in between. As far as like distribution to bars and restaurants, I'm not sure. We're 25 miles from Maryland, so maybe someday we'll add Maryland to our territory. But we're always going to be a small regional cider company. Maybe a bordering state or two is all the more ambition we're ever going to have as far as that stuff goes. Now, the shipping thing is 100% pandemic related, and that was something that was very fortunate to kind of have this idea to start pursuing that shipping kind of thing in the fall of 2019, but we were busy. And then literally I was on vacation during, I think it was like the 13th of March. I was in Asheville, North Carolina, when it became very clear that the world was falling apart. And we actually launched the shipping from the hotel room on vacation. So, and we were very fortunate to be, an early adopter of direct consumer shipping, and that really helped out. But yeah, we've just been very fortunate to find, partner restaurants, bars, retailers that kind of understand what we're trying to do, because, it's not as easy to explain, the general cider world is cider that's going to be, taken from a raw ingredient to a finished product in a turnaround time that could be as short as 4 weeks to maybe 8 to 10 weeks. All of our ciders take at least 8 months from beginning to finish, from apple to finished product. And, we feel like discerning drinkers can taste the extra time and effort that went into creating that product. But, the degree to which the consumers can understand that is not a given. And so we're just so incredibly fortunate to have relationships with bars, restaurants, package shops, retailers who can kind of tell that story for us when we're not there, because, without the understanding of, this is something that, if you're looking at the economics of it, if I'm paying the same amount for equipment as our competition that's making ciders that you can turn around in 2 months, then, they're going to make 5 batches every year on their equipment. I'm going to make like 1.4 or 1.2. So like, it makes the economics really difficult to make cider the way that we do. And so when we find people that understand why we're doing it that way and why it costs what it costs, that's a really, really treasured relationship. And so we try to do everything we can to really honor their commitment to us when they're willing to bring us in like that. So we're very fortunate to work with some awesome folks, and we're just so grateful that they've taken the time to understand what we're doing.
So I'm on your website now, and like after drinking these ciders, I was chatting with someone on Threads today, because that's my new thing, is establishing our presence on the new social media, who is a member of your cider club. And
yes!
Well, I'll let you talk about the plowshares that you guys offer.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, man, if we have a steadfast commitment to our bars and restaurant partners, believe me, we go above and beyond for our plowshares members, because those folks that are, really that committed to what we're doing, it feels amazing, and we just want to give them all the best experiences, whether it's in-person experiences and festivals and music and access to cider and archival cider. Our Plowshares Cider Club was launched at the same time as our direct-to-consumer shipping. Folks in 40 different states are eligible. If we can ship it to you, you're eligible to be a Plowshares member. And it's something that has quarterly releases. We just released our most recent cider club in the middle of June. We're going to try to skip these hottest months, and we'll be getting our next batch of ciders out to our Plowshares members in November. But it's either half a case or 6 units a quarter, or the large version is 12 or a case each quarter. And each of those different levels of commitment comes with a big discount. You get 10% off everything for the Plowshares Peck, which is the smaller, and you get 20% off all of your cider orders for the Plowshares Bushel. And that applies to if you're visiting us at the farmer's market, if you're at our tap room, if you're at an event here in Philadelphia or out in Pittsburgh, or wherever we might do an event, that discount follows you everywhere you might find a Ploughman cider. Aside from bars and restaurants, they got to do their own thing. But, and we really go out of our way. Like, we just had 2 super small batch ciders that were featured in this most recent release, a single varietal Wixon from a barrel and a single varietal Kingston Black. Both of those were 1 barrel batches. They were 53 gallons. Oh. And no one else has bought any aside from we did get some to Monks for a special beer week event. And the Cider Club members are the only people outside of our organization who have tasted those ciders so far. They'll be making their way out to the tap room and farmers market soon. But it's just so rewarding to have people willing to wave your flag high like that. And so we go out of our way to give them the best experiences possible. And they get discounts to all of our anniversary celebrations and all of our music festivals and stuff. They get in at a discount or sometimes free. And we just think the world of them. So shout out to your friend who's the member.
Well, I have it. It sounds like really awesome November. So if I sign up now, though, then I don't get anything till November. But I can order things in the meantime, too.
Until September, and then there'll be
September. Okay.
Yeah, September,
that's
and then
close.
another one.
It's July already.
Oh, this summer's flying by. I can barely keep my head on straight. But what are you gonna do?
So I was also looking at the website while you were talking about that, and I stumbled upon merch, which I like a lot of the designs and the label art. And then I saw a shirt that was towards the end. What is Cidernalia?
Like Saturnalia?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that that is our anniversary party. Every year we hold Cidernalia in Biglerville, Pennsylvania, which is the closest town to where our cider is made and where our orchard is. So it started out as just our anniversary party, and I'm still really a rabid consumer of ancient Roman history. By the time I put it together in my head that that like the traditional feast of Saturnalia and that whole festival was at a similar time of year as when our actual anniversary party was. I'm like, all right, smush them together, Cidernalia.
Love it. I love it.
So yeah, so that'll be coming up. If folks want a reason to come visit us, that is as good a reason as I can come up with. Well, we have the National Apple Harvest Festival in the fall as well. So those are, any excuse is a good excuse to come visit us in Adams County, but certainly the first 2 weekends in October, you can go to the National Apple Harvest Festival. It's right there in Orangeville. I describe it as like the Bubba Gump shrimp of apples, like an apple, everything that you can think of. That's a really wonderful time to visit us in Adams County. And if that doesn't suit, December 9th of this year, we usually have about 7 bands or so that perform live from noon until 10. It's a very affordable ticket, and you get our anniversary glassware and your first pour for free for like $10 is usually the ticket, which is pretty much exactly what the cost of a glass and a cider fill would be anyhow. And yeah, we raise money for the Land Conservancy. The Land Conservancy is our charitable partner for our festival in the summertime in June. But Cidernalia supports the South Mountain Partnership, which is a kind of landscape level farmland preservation and conservation organization, because we're really passionate about keeping Adams County, green, lush, agricultural, maintaining all of our beautiful natural resources in that landscape around Adams County into the Cumberland Valley and the greater South Mountain region. So that's something we're really passionate about. So it's a good excuse to throw a big party with great music for a great cause. And where all those things come together is where I like to hang out. So it's Cidernalia is a good time. And we invite everybody to look out for some artist announcements and some ticket announcements here pretty soon with that.
That sounds awesome. I also had no idea there was a National Apple Museum, let alone that it would have been in our state.
That's it. Yeah. Adams County is the 5th largest apple producing county in the United States. So we're responsible for over 70% of Pennsylvania's crop is just in that small county.
Wow.
The county seat is Gettysburg. So our 10-year average is somewhere around 7.8 million bushels in Adams County alone.
Oh.
So, we're just one of many farming families in Adams County that have been growing, the best tree fruit in the world, in my opinion. I really believe that. We have the ability to, like, the soils are ideal. The sloping hillsides create lots of air drainage, which protects us from frost. I even feel bad bringing that up. I know that our friends in upper New England were just devastated by a late frost this year. And I've been in touch with some of my friends up in Vermont, and we're going to figure out some way to help some of those orchards out. But, we've been very fortunate, knock, 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 that Adams County with our, hillsides have been, very resistant to late season frost damage. And we have we have become very used to having a regular crop of apples in Adams County, and not just the regularity, but we feel like the quality is extraordinary, and that's worth saving. It's unique, and it's worth the work to preserve. So that's really one of the driving forces behind everything we do at Ploughman and Three Springs, for that matter.
Wow.
Very cool. Very cool.
That's crazy. I had no idea.
You talked about other farming families in the area. I couldn't help but notice, looking at a map, that nearby is a place called Wankville. So is there a lot of that where like old family names are just kind of like from family farms in that area?
Oh, certainly. It's still a very agricultural community now, and oftentimes, our whole area in Adams County tends to be defined by 3 days of brutal fighting in 1863. And those of us in agriculture have said, well, agriculture was the biggest industry then, and it's still the biggest industry now. So maybe there's more that Adams County has to offer than, Civil War tourism. And that's another thing that we're very passionate about. We think that we can, give people some wonderful experiences around agriculture and apples and cider, and that, that we can still do that and, still have folks visit us for the history, because I think it's important that we all know our history and remember our history, but that Adams County doesn't have to be just defined by 3 days in July 160 years ago, that there's more to offer in our part of the world.
And definitely worth preserving. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, dare I ask, Wayne, as
Dare you?
take your swig of seltzer.
I was waiting for someone to dare. Would y'all like to play a game?
I think it's time to play a game.
Let's play a game.
I just have to say, my brain is so happy right now. I love learning shit, and
Yeah,
I feel
I
like
know.
I have learned so much in this last hour or so.
Yeah. And especially, I like the agricultural side of it all is really fascinating to me.
Grafting
Absolutely.
apple trees to apple trees.
Yeah, very, very interesting stuff. And now we're gonna take it hard in the other direction and just be goofy for a couple of minutes.
Yes, my brain won't be happy in about 5 minutes.
So, cheers, internet, and welcome to Hippie Foon Tin Gems,
Yep.
the podcast trivia segment with impeccable pronunciation.
Wayne, do you smell toast?
I do not. Yes, this is Happy Fun Time Games, and I'm really I was gonna interject a little bit earlier because there was an amazing segue point to today's game, but we're having such good conversation that I didn't want to interrupt. But I am hoping to maybe move the needle on a few opinions on adjunct ciders, as today we play There's Weird in My Cider.
All right.
So this is a game for the uninitiated where I will tell you a little bit about a drink. It's usually a beer, but this time it's a cider that has an unusual, strange ingredient in it, and we'll give you 3 multiple choice options to decide what the weird thing is in that cider. So here we go. Without further delay, let's get this www.showontheroad.com, starting with Dan. First up, from 101 Cider House in Los Angeles, a cider that's apple base is blended with blood oranges and a cold infusion of fresh lavender. It also contains an ingredient that was trendy in the wellness scene and gives the beverage a rather unnatural look. Is that ingredient red algae, activated charcoal, or raw water?
Raw water?
The heck, like untreated straight from the... You said this place is in L.A.? Is it from the L.A. River water? Is that how raw this water is?
I don't think you can ask that question.
Oh.
But do you guys not remember raw water? That was like a trendy thing. I think it was like shortly before the pandemic, so we all got distracted not long after. But yeah, that was like a trend, a bad trend. Don't drink raw water.
Okay, so it was red algae, it was charcoal, or of course the raw water. I'm going to go B, because that sounds like an LA thing.
Okay, Steph, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to say activated charcoal.
Also saying activated charcoal, and finally Ben.
3 for 3. Let's go activated charcoal.
Everybody agreeing. Everybody is correct. I did kind of give away that it wasn't the last one when I told everyone not to drink raw water, but I couldn't help myself but to give that PSA because it's a very bad idea to drink raw water.
I also just have to point out I felt really good about my guess when, Ben, you started nodding emphatically right after I said it. So thank you for making me feel good about myself.
You got to
get
have
my
poker face.
back on here. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was in fact activated charcoal. It's called Black Dog, and they claim it was the world's first black cider. Sitting at 6.9% ABV, they tout this super dry... I know, you mentioned that earlier.
They're always 6.9.
Oh, yeah, no, I meant to say my Hail and True one is 6.9.
Super dry ciders claim to 0 carbs, 0 sugar, And the activated charcoal was derived from tropical coconuts, interestingly enough. So, yes, activated charcoal in that one. Moving on to cider number 2. It's really hard not to say the word beer. Cider number 2. And Steph is going to guess first on this. Next up comes from a West Palm Beach-based cidery known for out-of-the-box flavors. The Accomplice Cider Works have unleashed upon the world a maple bacon cider, a vanilla fig cider, and an experimental cider made with cookie dough. Keeping that sweet theme alive, they also have a quaff made with some colorful candy treats. Is it M&M's, jelly beans, or fruit snacks?
Jelly beans?
Is that what you're guessing, or are you asking if that was one of the options?
They all sound like terrible ideas.
I figured you were going to say Skittles and or Nerds were going to be in the mix somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, like, the only one I should
Write that down for the next time we play this game.
I mean, like, M&M's, like, as they melt, they would give off the color.
In your mouth
perhaps.
and not in your hand.
They melt in your cider, not
they
in your hand.
melt in your cider, not in your hand. But I don't know. They don't, like, impart, like, there would be no point to it. Of course, people put chicken nuggets in IPAs, so I don't know. I'm going to say jelly beans.
Staying jelly beans. After much deliberation, Ben, what do you think?
I'm not trying to be all copycat here, but I really feel like jelly beans are the one that would. Yeah, I think that's the one to go with here.
All right, B, so far the most popular letter of the evening. Dan, what do you think?
I'm sorry, I just can't stop laughing at. I'm so glad nobody heard me say what I said out of context, because to us we hear the entire conversation, but if somebody else were here, it would just be me sternly shouting, "In your mouth, not your hands."
Not a good look.
No.
I mean, most people would know that's from the M&M commercial, no?
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't
yeah,
think that's
but
as
out of
popular
context,
anymore.
somebody
I feel
shouting
like
that randomly.
if you went out you went to the park, you went to the mall, you stopped 10 people, and you asked what the slogan for M&M's was, I guarantee you'll get like a 30% hit rate.
Yeah, they don't use it much anymore either.
Yeah. I think they were sued out of it. I think I heard.
I think there would probably be a very distinctly noticeable division by age.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
would
going to
remember
say,
that.
are you calling us old?
Experienced.
Experience.
What were the options again? I'm sorry. Jelly beans were there
M&Ms,
somewhere.
obviously. Jelly beans and fruit snacks.
I'm going to go fruit snacks.
All right, going with...
No. You know what? Yes.
It's
Yes?
fruit snacks because that's the name of their cat.
I know, but I'm sticking with it.
Dan is going with fruit snack. Him and Steph are both correct in that is the correct answer and also the name of our cat.
Nice.
See, that's
The
why I
cider.
was,
point.
yeah, that's why I almost backed out of it, because I was like, no, fruit snack probably walked by when he made the game.
That's what I was thinking too. Damn
He
it.
probably did, but no, that was the correct answer. It was called Gummy Bomb, and it was aged 2 years. It was aged 2 years and rested on what they call, quote, premium gummy fruit slices, which is a somewhat vague description, and I have chosen to interpret it as fruit snacks because that is the name of our cat.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But that vanilla fig cider sounded really good.
Yeah,
I mentioned
as much as I
earlier.
love maple and bacon and apples, I don't think I would like that maple bacon cider.
Yeah, I don't know if that would be good or not.
I'd be willing to try it, but I don't expect to like it.
As long as it came with a maple bacon donut on the side.
Oh, there you go.
it has to.
Oh, the speaking of the cookie dough one I mentioned, they described as being a cross between a cider donut, which are really good, and Chips Ahoy, which sounds like a weird combo.
Oh,
Yeah,
I do like a cider donut.
yeah.
I do like
great.
a cider donut, but I don't think that goes with a Chips Ahoy.
Only one way to
No.
find out.
I guess so.
Drink that
We're
cider.
gonna have to experiment. Well, we have arrived at our penultimate cider of the game, and we've come to Ben to guess first on this one. We continue crisscrossing the nation, this time heading to Stowe, Vermont, and its eponymous cidery for our next entry. This is a semi-dry cider that endeavors to evoke a foodstuff almost as American as apple pie, but it is not apple pie. Is it peanut butter and jelly, cornbread, or pecan pie?
Oh boy. Sorry, could you go over those three again one more time? Because I was already guessing what I thought it was going to be. I didn't
And it
come
wasn't
up.
one of the
It's like me
options.
with the Skittles and Nerds.
What?
It
Chicken
was
and waffles.
Oh.
Oh, I
peanut
love
butter
chicken
and
waffles.
jelly, cornbread, or pecan pie.
I'm gonna go pecan pie. I
All
think
right.
the other ones feel like a force fit. That one's kind of resonating with me. I just love it too. So.
Okay. Going with pecan pie. I do love a good pecan pie myself, or pecan, however you choose to say it. Dan,
Chicken and waffles.
that's not an option.
It is now. Also, that
Well,
that would probably be pretty good.
It would also be just like pissing away your opportunity to point because you know it's not the right answer.
No, obviously I know. I'm going to say pecan pie as well.
Okay, say pecan pie as well. And finally, Steph.
I'm gonna say peanut butter and jelly then.
Oh,
Watch it be
breaking with the
cornbread
trend.
just to spite us all.
And it works because the correct answer is peanut butter and jelly.
Yes,
It is
and
indeed.
I would drink that.
It is from Stowe Cider in Stowe, Vermont. It's called Brainwaves PB&J. The Brainwaves project is a series of ciders, an eclectic collection of dreamy experimental ciders, they call it, and includes this classic lunch bag staple inspired libation. By the way, no extracts in this. Real peanut flour and Concord grape puree are what give it its authentic flavors.
There does not appear to be a chicken and waffle cider out there, so
Well.
Ben, I feel like this is your opportunity.
I'm on it. and so are people like down with the Pennsylvania Dutch chicken and waffles or like the Southern chicken and waffles? There's a
Wait.
big divide there.
What's the Pennsylvania Dutch chicken and
I
waffles?
don't know the difference because I'm not really a fan of chicken and waffles.
I'm sorry, it's one of my favorite things, so I had to ask. The Pennsylvania Dutch version is like you get the hot waffle, then you put like the chicken gravy with the bits of chicken onto the waffle. Whereas in the South, you have like the fried chicken, the syrup, and the waffle.
See,
So,
that's
No, fried chicken.
yeah. For me, it's the fried chicken with the syrup.
Says the vegetarian of 20 years.
there you go.
I think that Pennsylvania Dutch version sounds pretty good, personally.
Well,
I'm
it's
going to have
just
to give that a
like
try.
pot pie to a Pennsylvania Dutch person is not the same as pot pie to the rest of the country
Yeah.
as well. Like when my mom made pot pie, it was fresh rolled out noodles.
Oh yeah. Oh
Then,
man.
like people are like, "That's not pot pie. That's not a pie."
I miss Pennsylvania
here.
Dutch pot pie. That stuff is so good.
So good.
There's some really good PA Dutch food items to be had. We had some friends over the weekend, and I got one of those like cheap, not charcuterie, but like ring bologna and cheese cube trays, and I was like, this is so PA Dutch.
That's
I love
the Pennsylvania Dutch charcuterie board.
it. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have business to attend here, so I'm going to add up the scores and see where everybody is standing right now. My fellow co-hosts tied, each with only one incorrect response, 2 points apiece. Our guest, Ben, unfortunately, you are falling behind. You only have 1 point so far. So what that means is we're going to let you guess last so that you get to hear their answers before you give yours. So we'll just swing back to Dan to go first on our final cider of the game. Lastly, staying in the Northeast, a semi-dry traditional method orchard cider from Treasury Cider in Hopewell Junction, New York. It's made with wild fermented quince, which is like a pear, if you don't know. Quince, I think I'm saying that right. And heirloom.
Isn't it quince?
Is it quince?
It
I
is.
thought
It's quince.
Oh,
It's quince.
Yeah, and
Thank
they
you.
have a cider, a quince cider, right?
Yep.
See, I did my research.
Nicely done.
I should have asked the barber how to pronounce quince first. I mean, obviously. But yeah, I guess it's kind of like a pear. So that's what we're imagining here. It's also made with heirloom. You may have to correct me again. Macintosh, John O'Mac, Empire, Golden Delicious, and Maccoon.
That one, honestly, I've heard McCowan and McCoon.
Okay.
I don't honestly know which is the correct pronunciation, but both are very typically used. Yeah.
Okay. We'll say they're both acceptable pronunciations. Anyway, it's made with all those varieties of apples, and I'm much more used to listing hop varieties in this context, I must say. But it is then steeped in a locally foraged native ingredient. This is the important part. Is that ingredient sumac, witch hazel, or honeysuckle?
Ooh.
Dan, you're up first.
Honeysuckle is standing out to me.
Dan saying honeysuckle. Steph
I was gonna say. Then I'll say witch hazel.
saying witch hazel. Two different answers so far. Ben, strategy only gives you one option. What do you think?
Well, I was pretty committed to doing the sumac anyhow because I've had some cider with sumac before,
Uh-oh.
and that was confidently going to be my guess. So fingers crossed. Let's see. Let's,
All right,
see
well,
how this goes.
serendipitous that it was the only guest, not guest, and also correct. It is in
Hey,
fact
all right.
sumac. Yes, Treasury Cider takes a walk on the wild side with this creation that they call Wild at Heart. Now, if sumac in a beverage sounds familiar, I'm saying that right, sumac, Ben?
Yeah. You also get some people that go shoeback, but I've heard of both ways as well. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna stick with sumac. If sumac in a beverage sounds familiar, it was a mere 5 episodes ago.
Oh,
I thought it was longer until I looked it up, in which a beer made with sumac and plums was featured in this game from Earthbound Brewing. But the real selling point on that one was the plums, because the beer was called Jeff Goldplum.
Oh, I do remember that.
Yes. Now, sumac. We usually hear poison sumac. Now, I'm sure Ben knows all about this, but for the rest of you, we learned back then, and I will recap now, sumac is apparently a spice, as well as any of about 35 species of flowering plants in the genus Rhus and related genera in the cashew family. In this case, our ingredient is specifically staghorn sumac, a New York native shrub with clusters of fuzzy vermilion-hued fruits that are dense, heavy, and oily with a robust citrus flavor. This lends a rosy color, an earthy flavor, and a slightly astringent finish to the cider, according to reports. That all well and good, Ben?
Yeah, that all checks out. So shout out to my friends at A Few Bad Apples out in Pittsburgh who make a couple different sumac ciders. Easy for me to say. And also, there is a great Instagram follower. I forget her name. Her Instagram handle is Black Forager, and she has a great reel on how to make a lemonade-style non-alcoholic beverage using sumac. And it looked amazing. I really want to try it this year.
Interesting. So there you go. Sumac is not just poisonous. You can actually eat and drink it, too.
There's
more.
One of the cooking channels that I watch on YouTube, one of them had a recipe that I really wanted to try with sumac. Not as easy to find as you may think.
Oh, like in a store?
Yeah, or at least at the time. I think it was sumac.
Oh, she's amazing. Black
What?
Forger. I highly recommend following her. She's
Oh.
smart and hilarious.
Okay,
Yes,
we'll write
for
that
sure.
down.
Oh, by the way, I have to
Sounds
say this.
familiar.
Dana, I appreciated you making the bird can dance on camera. Thank you for doing that. That was funny.
My
Yes.
assistant and fact checker.
And
And cider sharer.
Yes.
There's no way I could drink all 4 of these ciders by myself. So
That would be a lot. So I
I think we have a German sparkle
I was
party.
just
I'm
trying to
saying.
contain my excitement. We have a German sparkle party.
I like German sparkle party.
A 3-way tie for first place in today's episode of Happy Fun Time Games. Everybody has 2 points, 50% all around. Congratulations. No winners, no losers. Everyone, props for participating. Thank you very, very much. Now, a little more housekeeping. This is, of course, the point of the podcast where we shout out to our most generous Patreon patrons supporting us on the interwebs. We would like to thank the following individuals very sincerely, beginning with Jen McDonald. Eric Dixon.
We're fucked.
Dana.
Let's have the biggest party we can.
Oh, James Lambert.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Mahoney.
And the pickles.
Sean Sullivan.
Just an innocent man at a bar eating pickles.
Ryan Mills.
Amazing.
Amazing. Jill Chivers.
Nailed it.
The one and only That's No Baloney, Joe Mansell.
As soon as you put it in your mouth, you totally get the banana.
Haven't heard that one in a while. Topher Simmons.
Traffic and transit on the 2s.
Classic. And Ben Mangle.
Give me all the cream.
If you want to find out how you can get your name on this list and get other cool behind-the-scenes perks, go to patreon.com/beerbusters to learn more. And now there may or may not be commercials coming.
Say, Yvonne, remember when I said I'd have to send away to NASA to calculate your bar tab?
Oh, yeah. We all had a good laugh, Mo.
The results came back today. You owe me $70 billion.
Hey guys, we want to tell you about Audible. Audible has audiobooks available for download, and you can listen to them on the go, in the car, while you're jogging, while you're drinking beer. You can find books like Brewing Up a Business, Adventures in Beer from the founder of Dogfish Head Craft Brewery, revised and updated. Find books like that and more at audibletrial.com/beerbusters. Once again, go to audibletrial.com/beerbusters. Get a free 30-day trial of Audible and download and keep one audiobook forever.
So Ben, I have a question, and this popped up in my stupid
Sure.
brain earlier. you said multiple times that you were an Apple nerd, and I appreciate nerding out about whatever it is you want to nerd out about. But do you think you could do, or have you done, a blind taste test of Apple varieties?
I have not, but I would love to do that.
Oh, man. All right. We're going to do this. In fact, look outside your window right now. No.
Nice.
I feel like it would be more difficult to do a blind tasting of someone else's apples, though, than your own, right?
True. I guess, yeah, if there's different flavors and such.
Well, yeah, and like each year the apples will taste different, and if they're picked like too green or too early or too late, a lot of contributing factors. But there's a couple I feel like I could pick out of a lineup blind. We'll see.
Any of them?
I love the challenge.
Do any of them have so no, flavor is a big component, obviously, and you mentioned that like cider apples are like the, only really good for cider. Do different apples have different textures, like noticeably different textures?
Yes, absolutely, and that's something that is also different about cider apples. I mean, they generally tend to be soft and dry. A lot of the bittersweets and bitter sharps that we're used to using do not have a texture of an apple that anyone would eat. But on the contrary, I believe Honeycrisp not only is become one of the more popular apples in the United States, but it has, like, they've studied it. It has a different cell structure. I believe the cells are noticeably larger in the flesh of a Honeycrisp apple, which is the main contributor to that extra explosive crispiness you get when you bite into a Honeycrisp. So yeah, the diversity of apples is not limited just to flavors and colors and shapes and stuff. It's texture and usage and all that stuff. I'm sorry, I get really fired up about apples, but yes, that's a big part of it. Is the different textures are very, very noticeable.
Okay.
Can explosive crispiness be the name of this episode,
explosive crispiness. Yes, absolutely.
I freaking love it. And that needs to be a name of a future cider.
I like that. I'll put it on the list. Got a running list here.
That is a good name. I like that a lot.
Explosive crispiness. I love it.
Okay, I have another question that's kind of like, it's a me thing with apples. I love apples.
Sure.
But I've always liked Golden Delicious, sometimes Granny Smith if I'm in the mood for it. But I could never really do red apples. What is so different?
No, all red apples?
There's just something about it. It doesn't... When I think of an apple
do you
flavor...
mean Red Delicious?
What did I say?
You said red apples.
Well, red... Okay, yeah, Red Delicious.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but like, is there a scientific reason for why I don't like Red Delicious apples? Because to me, they are not delicious while they are red.
Oh boy, there's a potential 20-minute answer to this question, but I'll spare you all in favor of a much more direct answer. So, the history of the Red Delicious apple is very interesting, but the bottom line is this: like, Red Delicious is a variety that consistently for about 20 years was selected for its shipping and aesthetic qualities. So very oftentimes, one of the ways you get a new variety rather than somebody, like, for example, we were talking about Honeycrisp. Honeycrisp was a variety that the University of Minnesota was working on in their breeding program. So that's one way you get a new variety. But the most common way is that a variety that everybody already knows undergoes a completely random genetic mutation. And so in that way, we think of Red Delicious as one thing, like it's a single variety. When Red Delicious has been there's, a million different kinds of Red Delicious. Like on our farm, we used to grow, I think we still grow 3 different kinds of Red Delicious, but we used to have 5 different kinds of Red Delicious. Because what would happen was the regular Red Delicious would have a mutation, and that mutation made the apple darker red, and it made it thicker skinned. And they're like, well, that will help sell it and transport it. And so then that one would mutate, and it would just our industry kept selecting Red Delicious that didn't taste like anything because we wanted them to be able to be shipped all over the world. Really, they're a great export apple still to this day. rather than how they tasted. And this was a really big change in the whole apple industry. There was at one point we were all told that if an apple wasn't red, yellow, or green, like one color, no one was ever going to buy it. Gala was brought to this country as a commercial variety from New Zealand, and Gala was kind of like, kind of bicolored and stripy and wasn't a uniform color. And all the experts, quote unquote experts, said, well, this apple doesn't have a future. It's not going to sell because people expect them all to be one color. But Gala are actually now the number one consumed apple in the United States. And so now we have apples that are all kinds of different color. But, during like the Red Delicious's ascension to American apple dominance, that was a path that was just littered with poor decisions based 100% on shipping and aesthetics. And, now we have apples that are much more likely to be popular based on their flavor and texture rather than their appearance.
So what I'm hearing is I am right for not liking Red Delicious apples. Thank you.
Yes, I will endorse that sentiment. We don't even take them to farmers markets anymore, but I remember the last 2 years that I did, I literally just wrote on the sign, good for still life photography, and was out in the open about it. I'm like, yeah, we got them if you want them, but not a whole lot of redeeming qualities in the modern Red Delicious. Now, the original Red Delicious, which was called Hawkeye back in the day, and then later, what was it after that? But originally Hawkeye, very delicious apple, but they're incredibly hard to find. The Hawkeye is only going to be available through true believers, nerds, and apple collectors. The real hardcore folks out there might be able to get you a Hawkeye if you're curious.
Wait, did you say apple collectors?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of folks who, I mentioned the test block that we're growing. There's a whole great community of folks out there that are just apple enthusiasts that want to collect and maintain some of these old varieties that once were thought to be lost to history. And so I actually do encourage anyone out there, if you're listening to this podcast and you have an apple tree that you don't know what the name of it is or what the variety is and you want to learn more about it, get in touch with me, and you might have a super rare variety that might be the last living specimen of a variety that could be important to the apple industry. And there's another organization out there you can learn about called the Lost Apple Project, which is somebody who was ex FBI researcher and apple enthusiast is going around and trying to find these apple varieties that would otherwise be lost to history. There's the larger movement is kind of called the Fruit Explorers. And there's a great community of folks out there. You can learn more about Fruit Explorers and people who collect rare varieties of all kinds of fun, nerdy horticultural things. And they're a really fun bunch of folks to kind of be in touch with, because they're just as nerdy about all the stuff as what I am.
That's amazing.
That's so cool.
Oh, and I also have to point out, I meant to bring this up earlier too. You mentioned Johnny Appleseed and that he was a real person. In second grade, I watched what I thought was a movie, but I did a little research. It's a TV show. Martin Short played Johnny Appleseed in an episode of a TV show called Tall Tales and something or other. I watched it in second grade, and I have no idea why X amount of years later I still remember this. Probably because it's Martin Short.
What?
I like Martin Short.
I gotta seek that out. No, I mean,
let me see if I can pull it back up then.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I still did the tab open. Tall Tales and Legends. This was season 2, episode 4.
Tall Tales and Legends.
In fact, and I don't know if this is historical fiction or not, but do you know Johnny Appleseed's real name?
That'd be John Chapman.
At least, according to this tab, yes. I'm more likely to believe you than a random tab on the internet, so I'm glad you agree.
It's true.
I did a research project on Johnny Appleseed and came to school dressed as him in 4th grade.
Oh, wow.
I love that. Yes.
I even had the pot upside down on my head and everything.
Oh, wow. Oh, cool.
Wayne, what's your Johnny Appleseed tie-in?
I was just say I don't have any cool Johnny Appleseed anecdotes or anything. I'm sorry, but I think apples are cool.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And yeah, I just recently, CiderCon was held in Chicago this past year, and I drove there and back with almost exclusively so I could visit Johnny Appleseed's gravesite in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So you can put that on your atlas of interesting roadside stops out there, folks. If you're in Fort Wayne, stop by and pay your tributes to the original Apple nerd here on this continent, John Chapman. So that was a fun little detour for me.
That's so cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, I didn't know they did that. That's
really
awesome.
cool.
Wow.
Well, I'm going to tell you during that last conversation, I may have joined the Plowshares, so that's happening.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, you'll be getting getting some cider from us in no time here.
I can't wait.
And not everybody gets to experience. I really sincerely appreciate that. Thank you. That's awesome.
So I encourage everyone to go to plowmanciders.com. Check out the website. Consider membership. The idea of cider being shipped to my door, I'm very, very excited about that.
I don't know if we mentioned the cool patch and pin.
Oh yeah. Those look really cool.
A little extra added.
The problem will be choosing which jean jacket to put it on. I don't know.
Nice. I should also mention it's fully customizable, so you can choose exactly which ciders you get. And we just started inserting a little kind of newsletter / zine in each episode, in each shares too, where I can keep everyone updated about things around the farm and future releases and all your nerdy cider questions. I've got them all covered, so that'll be a new feature for members as well. So thank you so much. That's really exciting.
I'm excited.
That is awesome. So Steph already mentioned the website, ploughmancider.com. What about the farm? Where should people go if they want to learn more about the farm?
Sure. Our website is threespringsfruitfarm.com. That'll have lots of information on what we grow, a little bit of family history and farming in the area. And from there, you can also visit. We do have an e-commerce website called KeystoneSutler.com, and there's a portion of what we grow on the farm that we can actually ship to you. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. And in some cases, we can do some home-based delivery of some of our farm goods and our cider, for that matter, as well, from KeystoneSutler.com. So, that's worth checking out while you're perusing the web.
Social media for both, I'm guessing?
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't joined Threads yet, but I might need some instruction getting that going. But, certainly Facebook and Instagram is a great way to keep up with everything we got going on, including processing all those peaches and planting apple trees in the square of Gettysburg and all the fun stuff we get into. It's all documented there on Instagram and Facebook. So
very cool. Very cool. Well, while you were out there looking for Ploughman on the interwebs, you can follow along with us. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. We're at Beer Busters. Facebook, we are Beer Busters Podcast. There's beerbusterspodcast.com. Don't forget to click on the shop tab or just, tap in the little thing and add /shop to the URL. YouTube, there is Beer Busters Podcast, and of course Patreon, where we are Beer Busters. You can get yourself access to all the cool behind the scenes stuff, the punishment videos, the happy hour, the last call segments, all the cool extra goodies for as little as $1 a month. Can't beat that deal with a stick.
Who dat?
Sorry, my cat just meowed really loudly.
I was wondering what you were.
Well, no, I was kind of concerned at first because it felt like a cry, but she's just crying for attention. That's all. That's all.
Wow. Is that Fruit Snacks or a different cat?
Different cat. My cat is Moo. Yeah, I wish I could take credit for the name. She had it when I got her, but she's white with black spots. And Steph and Dana and Rich, they have Jack there floating around somewhere.
We have Jack, but he's hiding under the chair.
What a jerk.
I mean, he was snuggling earlier, but he's like,
No, he hit his limit.
Yeah. He's he's what, 13 now? He's like an elder cat, so he's like, fuck everyone.
Yeah. Fruit Snack would have been bothering me if Jess wasn't home, but she's home, so he's downstairs with her.
Gotcha.
Ben, thank you so much for joining us, man. This was so cool and very enlightening and riveting. This was such a cool conversation. I can't thank you enough for it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you all so much. I had a blast. It's an honor to be asked to speak on the podcast. And any chance I get to chat apples and cider, always happy to do it.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing, man. Thank you so much for your time. But I think, unfortunately, this brings us to the end of another episode of Cider Busters.
Cider Busters. Booze Busters.
Booze Busters. We're
Good catch-all.
We're inching our way
Beverage
there.
Busters?
Yes.
Should we just change it to Busters?
We could.
We'll be
could.
like Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, right.
Or we could be Blank Busters. That's alliterative. And every episode's just about something random.
There we go. That works
I mean,
too.
we do swear a lot.
Yeah, that is also true.
Oh, yeah. I noticed Ben censored himself early on because we didn't tell him he was allowed to swear, but that's okay.
Whoops.
Yeah, I had no fucking idea.
There it is. Better late than never.
Got it in at the end.
Yes. Well, my name is Dan Baker. I am joined by my co-host and brewologist.
Steph Hefner.
And the demented and fermented
Wayne Baker.
Remember, it's not about the liquid, it's about the experience. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Gonna have some peachy alcohol dreams.